Think the greatest secrets of humanity are hidden in Egyptian tombs or under the Yucatan jungles? How about a city whose streets are paved with stone, carried 200 kilometers across the open ocean? And all of this lies at a depth of 100 m, where, according to official science, no human has ever set foot. Or pyramids with even steps in a single unit of measurement that academics still refuse to recognize as man-made? Today we will descend to the bottom of the Pacific Ocean, where neither sunlight nor official history textbooks reach. You will see stone maps depicting islands that long ago sank beneath the waves. You will learn about a writing system that should not exist, and a tunnel carved into rock 1,000 years before Rome built its first aqueduct. And at the very end, an artifact that baffled laboratories on 3 continents. For decades, oceanographers studied the Pacific Ocean floor for one purpose: to map tectonic faults and predict where the next earthquake would strike. The seabed was considered dead space: silt, basalt, darkness, and pressure of several hundred atmospheres. History textbooks on civilization were written without a single footnote pointing to the Pacific region as a cradle of culture. All great civilizations, we were told, were born along rivers: the Nile, Euphrates, Indus, and Yellow River. Islands in the middle of the ocean are fishermen in palm leaf huts. Nothing more. This axiom was so unshakable that it was never questioned simply because no one saw the point. Everything changed in 1985. Japanese diving instructor Kihachiro Aratake was making a routine dive off the coast of Yonaguni Island, a tiny patch of land on the very edge of the Japanese archipelago, 100 kilometers from Taiwan. He wasn't looking for anything unusual, but at a depth of about 27 m, his flashlight illuminated something that took the breath away from an experienced diver. Before him stood a giant stepped platform: straight edges, right angles, wide terraces, and what looked like a staircase carved into the stone. The structure was about 25 m high, over 100 m long, and it was not a rock, but a construction. Official science reacted immediately and predictably. University biologists lined up to explain it away. Sandstone splits along natural planes. Nature can create the illusion of right angles. Nothing surprising. Academic journals published articles by authors who had never personally dived to the site. Professor Masaki Kimura from the University of the Ryukyus did things differently. He spent over 15 years underwater at Yonaguni with hundreds of dives, 1,000 photos, and detailed measurements. He found details that do not fit any geological model. Round holes on the stone surface, evenly spaced, a triangular depression with perfectly straight sides, and on the sidewall, a relief image resembling a stylized human face. Nature does not create faces, only intelligence does. But Yonaguni turned out to be only the first signal. The real story began later, when deep-sea scanning technologies ceased to be a monopoly of naval departments and fell into the hands of independent researchers. Multi-beam sonars, underwater drones with high-resolution cameras, autonomous vehicles capable of operating at depths up to 500 m, all of this revealed the Pacific Ocean floor in a completely different light than ever before. And what they saw did not fit the familiar picture of the world. Off the coast of Micronesia, at a depth of about 80 m, sonar detected an anomaly, a perfect circle nearly 300 meters in diameter. The first reaction was standard: a submarine volcanic caldera, nothing special. The Pacific region is literally riddled with extinct volcanoes. Their craters can indeed be round, a convenient, logical explanation that turned out to be completely wrong when a vehicle with high-resolution cameras was lowered to the bottom. The circle turned out to be a wall, not of lava rock, but of dressed stone blocks about 2 by 3 m in size, tightly fitted together. The wall, about 4 meters high, formed a ring inside which stood the remains of columns. Someone built a circular complex here and built it on land before these waters became waters. The expedition geologists took samples and sent them for analysis. The result turned out to be inconvenient for all parties. The blocks were made of andesite, a rock that is not found in this region. The nearest deposit was on an island 200 kilometers away. This meant that someone transported about 1,000 tons of stone across the open ocean, long before the rising sea level after the glacial melt covered this place with water. So, at least 10,000 years ago, official science chose not to comment on the analysis results widely. But the researchers understood that they needed to look further in 2008. An expedition led by a private oceanographic institute surveyed a section of the seabed between the Marshall Islands and Hawaii. At a depth of about 120 m, an underwater drone detected a straight line of almost 5 kilometers running strictly from northwest to southeast on the screen. A geological fault, a crack in the oceanic crust. The researchers descended closer and saw a road-flat stone slabs about 3 meters wide, laid end-to-end with polished surfaces. On some slabs, parallel grooves at regular intervals, traces of wheels or runners left by someone who moved here. When this was still land, no geologist could explain why a natural crack has exactly the same width over 5 kilometers, because it is not a crack. The road led to an underwater plateau covering about 20 km, located at depths from 90 to 140 m. And when they began to scan it in detail, what appeared on the sonar screens was what the researchers saw. At first, they did not dare to call it by its name: clear rectangular structures along parallel lines, a central square surrounded by massive foundations, a system of canals connecting all parts of the settlement. This was the plan of a city, not a hint of it, not a figment of the imagination, a plan that only someone who can think in space, distribute functions, and lay infrastructure can create. The academic community responded with the usual set of explanations. Underwater currents erode sedimentary rocks and create rectangular shapes. Coincidence, optical illusion, but the drones were already filming details that these explanations could not handle. In one of the foundations, grooves for connecting blocks, a technique requiring precise planning. In another place, a stone trough with a calculated slope. Water flowed strictly in the right direction. On the walls of the central building, a relief depiction of sea creatures, stylized in a way that only the human hand can stylize. And in the middle of all this, in the center of the plateau, stood a stepped pyramid, height about 12 m, base 40 by 40 m. It is made of blocks of dark stone, covered with a mineral coating, under which traces of processing, smooth edges, recesses. They could have served as a rainwater drainage system when the pyramid still stood in the open air. The expedition engineer measured the angles of inclination of the faces. The deviation between opposite sides was less than 1 degree. Nature does not create such symmetry. Each step was exactly 120 centimeters high, a standardized unit of measurement, applied repeatedly and without error, and on top of the pyramid lay a flat stone with a carved symbol, a spiral inscribed in a circle. This sign was later found in several other places in the city. It clearly meant something. What exactly was to be determined? About a kilometer from the pyramid, the drone discovered a tunnel. The entrance to it was cut into a rock ledge and designed as a regular arch about 3 m high, framed by blocks of stone of a different color from the surrounding rock. Official history claims that tunnel construction became possible only in the Roman era, and that such technologies did not exist at all in the Pacific region. The tunnel went into the rock for more than 50 m and ended in a chamber. Inside, there were stone boxes, sarcophagi, or storage. The walls retained traces of something like a protective coating that prevented the vault from collapsing. Someone thought about the durability of this place. Someone built it so that it would outlast centuries inside one of the boxes. Thanks to the airtightness of the stone and the lack of oxygen, objects were preserved that turned the team's ideas about the capabilities of ancient technologies upside down. Plates of obsidian, thin to almost transparent state, yet incredibly strong. When one of them was brought to the surface and examined under a microscope, they brought it to the surface and examined it under a microscope, discovering that the surface had been processed with precision comparable to modern optical polishing. Obsidian is one of the most fragile natural materials. Official science considers it impossible to work with it at such a level without diamond tools. Nearby lay rings, made of a copper-based alloy with the addition of a third metal, which 3 independent laboratories could not immediately identify. The surface of the rings is covered with microscopic notches forming a complex regular pattern. One ancient technology specialist suggested it was acid etching, a method requiring a level of chemical knowledge that we do not attribute to Pacific cultures. Random corrosion does not create regular patterns. Any metallurgist knows this. Outside the tunnel, in the eastern part of the settlement, at the bottom of a shallow pool, lay stone spheres, dozens of them. From 30 centimeters to over a meter in diameter, the surface polished to a mirror finish, deviation from a perfect sphere less than a millimeter. Similar spheres are known in Costa Rica, where they are traditionally explained by months-long rolling of a stone on the ground. But the Pacific spheres are made of granite, a material an order of magnitude harder. Simple rolling is physically impossible. The expedition's engineer performed calculations. Achieving such precision requires an abrasive machine with a rotating element. Moreover, several spheres turned out to be hollow. Inside each cavity were small pebbles that rattled when shaken. This is not decoration. A hollow sphere with a filler of a certain weight works as a pendulum or level. The inhabitants of this city knew mechanics and applied it practically. Meanwhile, another group worked with symbols found throughout the settlement. By that time, more than 200 different signs had been recorded, many of which repeated in certain combinations. Official science long ago ruled that the peoples of the Pacific had no writing system before contact with Europeans. Knowledge was passed down orally through myths and songs, and any signs on stones were merely decoration and nothing more. The expedition's linguists thought otherwise. The symbols were grouped in sets of 2-3 signs, and these groups were reproduced in logical sequences. On a stone tablet at the entrance to the pyramid, a message over 80 signs long was carved, arranged in rows from left to right. The direction of writing, grammatical structure, the linguist identified this as a logographic system. Each symbol denotes a word or concept, like Egyptian hieroglyphs or early Sumerian pictograms. If he is right, lying underwater is the writing system of an unknown civilization, about which there is not a single line in any textbook. In the southern part of the plateau, the terrain changed sharply. A cliff began descending to a depth of over 300 meters. And right on this cliff, a system of stone steps carved into the rock from the upper edge of the plateau to its foot. Each step about 5 m wide, about a meter deep, with grooves on the sides that could have served as guides for rope lifting systems or drains. Official science would insist that large-scale hewing work requires iron tools. The staircase existed depending on how convenient it was for the official version. Under the foundations of the central buildings, researchers found a system of stone pipes, hewn from solid basalt, connected by couplings using a natural cementing compound. When engineers reconstructed the direction of flows, the picture turned out to be astonishing. The system collected rainwater from the roofs, filtered it through gravel and sand, and delivered it to an underground reservoir. A closed water supply cycle. Historians claim that such a level of water supply appeared only in ancient Rome, but the inhabitants of this plateau created it much earlier. Because on a small island, fresh water is not a comfort, it is life. Engineering thought is born not from abundance but from necessity. When researchers mapped the settlement plan and compared it with the position of the starry sky, another detail emerged: the main axis of the city. The line from the central pyramid to the tunnel entrance precisely points to the rising point of Sirius in the era when the plateau was still above water. The 4 corner buildings around the pyramid face the 4 cardinal directions with a deviation of less than 2 degrees. The builders used the sky as a blueprint. This is a level of astronomical knowledge. It is comparable to what we see at Stonehenge or the Giza pyramids, but in a region conventionally considered a cultural periphery. Coincidence, perhaps, if you are ready to consider a precise axis, symmetrical arrangement of buildings, and a unified system of celestial orientation, a coincidence. In a building that apparently served as a public hall, researchers stumbled upon something they initially took for an architectural feature. The walls were slightly concave inward, and in niches stood stone vessels with wide necks. Directed toward the center of the room, the engineer created a computer model of the hall and calculated the acoustics. A person speaking in a whisper in the center was heard as if speaking loudly. At the same time, echo was completely suppressed. The sound remained clear and intelligible. Academic science calls such effects coincidence, but the concurrence of wall curvature, vessel placement, and precise room dimensions rules out chance. The architects of this hall understood the physics of sound and designed the space for a specific purpose, for one voice to reach hundreds of ears without losing a single word. At the edge of the plateau, right at the cliff, an underwater drone transmitted an image in the last hour of its operation. which made the team stay another week. In a niche carved into the rock stood a stone slab measuring 1 meter by 1.5. On it was carved a map, not a diagram, not a symbolic representation, but a detailed map with contours of islands, coastlines, and points, connected by straight routes. When compared with modern geography of the Pacific Ocean, the match was eerily accurate. The islands were depicted in correct proportions and at correct distances, and among them, land areas that no longer exist. They sank underwater along with the city itself 1,000 years ago, when melting glaciers raised the global sea level by more than 100 meters. The inhabitants of the underwater city saw their world as a whole. They inscribed it on stone with an accuracy that seems impossible without measuring instruments, or they had methods we are unaware of, or they accumulated so much experience of oceanic crossings that they remember geography the way we remember our own face. Now, pause for a second. Look at what has come together into one picture. It is a city with a layout and streets, a pyramid with unified units of measurement and astronomical alignment, a tunnel with an arched entrance and sealed storage chambers. It is a water supply system with a closed-loop filtration cycle, an acoustic hall designed for the human voice, a granite sphere with mechanical precision. It is a writing system with grammatical structure, a map matching real geography. And these are artifacts made of materials that still defy complete identification. All of this existed more than 10,000 years ago, 500, 600 years before the first written tablets appeared in Mesopotamia, which are commonly considered the birth of civilization. On tiny islands in the middle of the planet's largest ocean lived people who understood sound, water, stone, stars, and metal. This was a level we are used to associating with antiquity or the Middle Ages. History did not progress in a straight line from cave to skyscraper. It flared up in different points on the planet, faded, sank underwater, and waited until we had the tools to find it. Skeptics will say, the human brain sees patterns where there are none. That is a fair warning. Science must be cautious. But there is a limit beyond which the number of coincidences ceases to be coincidences. That limit has long been passed. A 5 kilometers long road of uniform width is not a crack. A pyramid with an angle error of 1 degree is not a volcano. A writing system with lines of direction is not decoration. And a map with correct distances between islands, some of which no longer exist, is not a whim of erosion. The Pacific Ocean covered this city with water, but did not destroy it. It preserved it in darkness and cold, patiently as it preserves everything that people lose.